these days I wonder if I'm paying enough attention to soccer. And I think part of that is there's so much soccer all the time, and
Yeah.
Gianni Infantino isn't making that easier. But I think it's another reason why I like that photo. It's because it's still, incorporating her into my interest in soccer. But at the same time, when we go to those Kickers games, it's not really. I think I end up watching maybe a half of a game. Sometimes it's like 10 minutes because I'm chatting with people or we're getting drinks or playing with her. And so it's more just about like the having fun aspect of it. Um,
Going to a
and
soccer
I
game
think,
is not actually about the soccer for Taylor because you're spending
yeah,
so much time analyzing and watching and playing in
yeah,
some cases.
exactly. But I think it's also that like when you don't have kids, you just have more time, and I can say like, yeah, I'm gonna stay up and watch these 3 games, or like after work, I'm gonna watch 2 games. And nowadays, it's like, no, like we got back time, we got books to read, we got dinner to be made,
Yeah.
and we split like the share of the work pretty equally, my wife and I. So I think between having a kid and then having like normal life chores,
Yeah.
doctor's appointments, whatever, there's always stuff that I feel like I'm missing,
Well,
and
so
especially
that
stuff that happens midweek or
I
mid
I
evening.
want to ask about the psychology of that then, right? Because you're allowed to have a family, you're allowed to have a life that is not your job, but we have chosen a profession,
Hmm.
and we have chosen something that is constant, not just all year long, because there really is no off season, right? But but
Hmm.
because of time zones, there's pretty much always a game in the world, and whatever you're choosing to focus on. And I know you guys have a wide range of topics. There's a lot. And do you have do you have anxious feelings over that in terms of meeting what your audience asks of you, or just living up to
Yeah.
some standard within the the soccer industry or whatever it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think, forgive me if I sound pretentious, but, I guess that's kinda my brand, who
That's
knows?
who you are, man.
But just that I think it's easy to talk about soccer all the time if you're lazy. If you wanna be lazy with it, if you wanna watch highlights and sort of listen to the talking heads and then go into a show, like, there's a world in which I didn't watch any soccer this weekend and could come in and talk about how the Galaxy are bad. I could talk about how like Man City are this juggernaut that can't be stopped, how Arsenal are coughing up the title, how Dortmund can't get out of their own way. There's
The
narratives that
narratives.
you can go with.
Yeah, sure.
But then within that, like you stop talking about the game from an informed standpoint. You're not actually watching, so you can't actually bring observed information to the conversation. And I think a huge part of that then becomes you also forget that you're talking about people and you're talking about humans who might be listening, but even if they're not,
Yeah.
it's just worth remembering, like, do I want to say this teenager sucks and he's never going to be good enough and he should quit? Like, no. Yeah, like you if anything, if you're going to bring criticism, it needs to be he's very good at this. This is where he's deficient. He's deficient at this. He needs to get better at that. And then he will be that next level player. But for now, he is what he is. Like you can have those conversations, and even that's still kind of rough. But I think that's it for me. It's always trying to be able to bring useful, observed information that isn't just me sort of uh, making stuff up or going with prevailing
So
narratives.
so
And
but
yeah,
do you and this is all based on who you are and your approach and sort of what you come to naturally, or do you think this is the what you established? And we're going to obviously talk some
yeah.
Daryl here on this
Mhm.
interview, but something that you established that now you have to meet that same standard that you started 10 years ago.
I don't have to. I think I strive to. It's definitely a thing that I think I learned my own to some extent, but it's a lot, Daryl. I think about when we first met and I was writing the Man United blog for him for the Offside. And so much of my stuff that I used to write was just very edgy or trying to be edgy. So it was like praising Roy Keane's malicious tackling and calling like Real Madrid Franco FC and all these things that I thought were really funny, but really it's just dumb banter.
Learn your history, kids.
And not really true. And then, but not really like doing that much aside from being hot takey and being cynical or snarky to be snarky. And I think to his credit, Daryl, that was never Daryl. I mean, he'll take a shot here and there, but even then, I think he'll usually feel bad, or he would have felt bad about those little comments and those little jabs. And I think even when he would burn somebody, I think he would always check to make sure that they were okay. But that's just him being a sensitive, thoughtful person. But definitely, he was the one who established the idea that like the Total Soccer Show's catchphrase for a while, or its like log line was the show that asks why or wants to know why.
Hmm.
And that was definitely his inspiration, was why did this happen? Let's observe, let's talk it out and figure out why, and at least come up with our own unique answer. And that meant not he never would check Twitter during games and really tried to avoid, I think, other people's takes, and he wanted his takes to be his own or
Yeah.
his analysis to be his own. And that's definitely something that rubbed off on me, and just the idea that if you are able to bring new information to people who might not have seen the game or might not have watched it the same way, it's always going to spark an interest. I think it's always going to just make them more enthusiastic about it. And then if you can find a moment that is just people didn't notice, but is important to understanding the game or to understanding a certain moment, just those little wrinkles of, oh, the Danes did this when they set up their wall, and that's how they were able to score a goal off of this that other people might not be mentioning. That's, I think, how you make a difference in my mind, is by helping people understand more.
Well, so we've already just established how much soccer there is. So it seems the approach of the Total Soccer Show is in direct conflict with the amount of soccer that exists in the world and
Yep.
the amount of soccer that you may want to cover. So what has that meant for? And obviously the team has expanded, in since Daryl's passing, and it's no longer just you and Daryl. But what does that mean for how you think about what do we cover? What do we talk about? How do we talk about it?
Sure. I think when it's me, like coming up with the structure or coming up with a schedule, it's what I feel like watching that week or what I'm interested in, blended with the big things. If there's Champions League on, we're going to talk about that. If it's Arsenal versus Man City, we're going to talk about that game. But Week in Review is deliberately designed. The Monday show we do is deliberately designed to just be, what do the three or four of us want to discuss? What are the games we watch? So I didn't watch some of the bigger teams this weekend. The two games that I took the most diligent notes on were Aston Villa, Newcastle, and Chelsea, Brighton. Those, for whatever reason, those are the games that I just thought were the most appealing and most interesting. Um, and I think when you're actually motivated and interested in the game, then you're gonna pay better attention and just be more
Okay.
interested and bring better stuff to the
That,
table.
that that's a little self-serving though, right? I mean, it's
Oh, for
okay,
sure.
but it's
Yeah.
self-serving.
It's also why, with that in mind, it's so we would always divvy up who selected listener questions when it was me and Daryl, and now primarily it's Ryan Bailey who picks the listener questions
Hmm.
now, and I really like that because I've noticed I err on the side of like very factual, dry questions, and I think Ryan does a very good job of finding the balance for all the co-hosts. So he'll have a data question or a stats question or an analytics question for Joe. There's always some weird Scottish question for Graham. Maybe I'll get a Man United question. Maybe I'll get a US question. Maybe I'll get something completely random, like if you're making a band out of footballers, who's going to be in there.
Right.
But I think Ryan does a great job of uh, finding those questions that will basically just appeal to different people in different ways. Graham then is usually the one who comes up with the topic for the big thing. That's our
Hmm.
Friday show where it's the big story that we haven't talked about that week. And Graham's really good at, I think, identifying the big major thing that needs to be discussed and then coming up with a plan for how to do that and have a structure that allows us to get more than just the surface level understanding. So, and Joe has, a ton of knowledge when it comes to Major League Soccer. So the Tuesday show, David Goss has joined us doing those. Helps me understand a lot more about MLS, a league that I'm not always as interested in the middle of the season. Beginning of the season, always into it. End of season playoffs, always into it. But that run of like, does this actually matter when every single team makes the playoffs? I don't know. I think that's one where I can easily switch off, but having people who care about it and want to talk about it pulls me back in. And I think other people's enthusiasm will always pull me back in.
So I want to go back to you. You said when you got back to Richmond, you were playing 6 nights a
Mhm.
week, and obviously a soccer junkie. I want to unpack a little bit Taylor Rockwell prior to the Total Soccer Show, and
Mm.
and learn a little bit about. I mean, you and I have had conversations. I would call us friends, so I know a little bit about your story, but I don't know. When soccer happened for Taylor Rockwell and how it fits in
Mhm.
with everything else that kind of makes you you.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the like kids jumping around thing earlier because that was my experience. I started playing soccer. I grew legs before I grew the rest of my body, so I had super long legs. I was pretty awkward. I was bad at soccer until I was 10 or 11, and I played t-ball. I was bad at that. I never knew what right field was. I struck out a lot in t-ball. That's no small feat. And I would jump around. And then, like, one year I just decided I wanted to play soccer, and it happened to be that I got better at it. And then I made a travel team and kept going from there and played in a bunch of tournaments and played all over the country and ended up going to college. And I went to a D3 school called Center College in Kentucky. Um, and I had gotten some interest from D1 schools and had been like a really good high school player, pretty good for my club. Won a few awards, but it's high school. No one wants to hear about high school awards. But I say all that just to say that I
don't
think
see.
because
This is a rule. There's a rule on this show, which you can't diminish yourself. It doesn't matter in the moment. I'm sure those felt like accomplishments to you.
well, they were.
Yeah.
No, for sure. I mean, no, it was like I got to go to the Dallas Cup and play with like the Virginia All Stars team with
that's
like Danny
incredible.
Carbassione and Adam Crispin, who were like the starting forwards for that team. One who played for Arsenal, one who played all over MLS, and like that whole team went D1. I was one of the few who didn't, and I think that's why I'm setting that stage to say that then when I went to a D3 school, I thought I was going to be like, oh, this is nothing. This is going to be high school. I don't even need to work. And I didn't. So I showed up overweight. I showed up not really understanding that the college game was going to be a different animal. And I got my ass kicked. So I sat the bench a lot. Only played the 1 year. Switched to American football. Played that my sophomore year. Went abroad my junior year. Played American football again my senior year. But a big part of quitting after my freshman year was basically that I just hated it. I really like spring season. So fall season is usually the college season, and then you have like the mini spring season. And I remember like praying for rain every day. Like I was just burnt out. I didn't like it, probably because I wasn't like the best player or wasn't a good player, but also just because it wasn't what I wanted to do. And I think I went through a couple of years of just not really liking soccer, not really caring about it. And then I moved back to Richmond and played with a couple of high school buddies on a team.
Did they have to convince you, or was it like, yeah, I'll play this. This is different than college. I'm sort of,
I think so. I moved back after college. Like I had vowed, like I'm going to graduate with a degree and I'm going to have a job and I'm never going home. And then I graduated with a degree in history and anthropology and had no idea what to do with that. So I worked in like kitchens for a while. Moved back to Richmond, and it was sort of all my college friends were in other states or still in Kentucky. So I had a few friends in Richmond, and it was sort of just like any opportunity for socializing and hanging out. And so they were playing on this team, which is one of the more random teams I've ever played on. It was called CLG Flames, which stands for Church of the Living God. It was, I believe, an African Pentecostal church soccer team. I think the guy who organized it is still banned from the local league here he made fake player IDs and he followed a ref home. Don't do that. Don't follow refs home.
Don't do that.
But
Ew.
I was really bad in one game, and then they desperately needed players because I hadn't played in forever. And so I came back and was decent enough that I kicked on from there and then kept playing. And and then I just fell back in love with it, mostly because I don't think I've always loved the drilling side of things, especially in college. I think I definitely tend to be a person who kind of wants to do what I want to do. And so getting to play with people that I wanted to play with on teams I wanted to play with kind of sparked that desire to play again. And then when that team broke up, I played for a couple other ones, eventually landing on one called Richmond City. And that was where I met Daryl Grove.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I mentioned hearing Robbie Earl talk on a podcast about soccer. And I think at the time that was way before NBC had the Premier League. And I think that kind of piqued his interest as to this dude who he doesn't really know is talking about an AFC Wimbledon player from years gone by. And so then, we just started chatting, and he was editing The Offside at that time and wanted to do a radio show locally in Richmond. He thought there was an opportunity, and I was into it because I always wanted to go into broadcasting and sports writing. I wrote for the paper in college. So we started doing it once a week on the local independent radio station, and then it kept growing from there. But that's basically how I fell back into it. And then that also worked out really well because I grew up playing soccer against two dudes. One guy was a year older than me. The other one was like 3 years older than me. But I recognized them, the oldest one, when I moved back to Richmond, like playing against him, and chatted with him after a game and just like, hey, man, it's good to see you. Yeah, I'm back in Richmond, blah, blah, blah. And then I ran into him at a bar like a few months later, and he was very drunk. To the point where I think he was like, I kind of remember this guy. I don't really want to talk to him. So he passed me off on his sister, who is now my wife. So that's how that all happened. So I guess, soccer worked out in a couple different ways.
The universe is looking out for Taylor Rockwell. I think it's what we got. Or perhaps the God from the church of whatever that was. Either one of those things.